Don't worry, I'll be right there. Hi, everybody. I am so sorry I couldn't be there in person today, but as you know, nurses and our world is a little hectic right now, but thank goodness for technology. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a speaker at this amazing event. I hope you're all having a wonderful time and can appreciate some of the things I have to share with you today. But first of all, let me take a minute and get comfortable. I'm gonna go take this mask off. Just hang on 1 minute.
Catherine. Here. Haley. Here. Chris. Rebecca. Here. Kathleen.
I can't exactly remember the exact moment I heard COVID-19. I was supposed to take a trip with my son to Japan, more and more news. It's like, we'll be fine. And then it just seemed to explode. Initially, we thought we just might need 8 beds. And then as we started getting into the COVID ICU, it became apparent that we were gonna have to stretch. These patients have to come in here and they're super sick. So you have to put yourself in their shoes to feel what they feel. You're in a hospital with strangers all around you, telling you to breathe, telling you to cough, and you're restrained and tied down.
Hey Joe, this is Breezy in COVID ICU land. We're getting ready to supinate a patient and cannulate them for ECMO.
I think day 2 of me working my first week in the COVID ICU, I just knew that this was gonna get a lot bigger and it could get really scary here. So I called my friend that night and my son was on a plane by 10 a.m. the next morning. He's in Kauai right now and he's been there since March 11th.
You already tested this thing?
Yeah.
I usually work 7 nights in a row. The day before, I have to take a long nap to make sure I can mentally switch and function appropriately.
Okay.
And then you can get through your 12-hour shift. You're trying your best, all the little tricks that you've known that have worked on patients that have had the really sick lungs in the past. But these tricks are not working. People are getting sicker.
Ready?
Whenever you put a breathing tube into somebody for the first time, you risk having droplets come out. There's definitely a risk.
There you go.
You do it. Always tell them what I'm doing, even if they are sedated. I always believe that people can hear you, and you need to talk to them.
I'm gonna turn you to the other side now.
I'm gonna give you this med, it's for this. You just verbalize it out loud. You hold people's hands. You sit there with them, talk about something that has nothing to do with the COVID-19. You just ask them about them. So I get to know them, their families, because they can't talk to their family. You're that bridge, and all you want to do is make sure that this person can go home.
Right, arterial camp is slowly coming off.
If you're already at the max level of support that you can give and their oxygen levels are dropping, there's really not much you can do except just let the family know. And can you imagine holding up an iPad to somebody who's intubated, really sick, and hearing their family tell them goodbye? Absolutely heartbreaking.
I'm gonna bring the camera over to him, okay?
Tears are coming down your face. I mean, you're human. This sucks. And we had a coworker, very young. We don't know if she got actually exposed at work, but she started feeling sick and she took herself off the schedule, doing it at home, like a lot of people do who test positive. But it just came to the point where she couldn't do that.
Hey, sweetie, you're in the hospital, okay? You're at Harborview. We're gonna take good care of you.
She was with us for 7 days on that breathing machine. She would write on a board. Being a nurse, she would always want to know what her vent settings were. And I think we were all standing outside the room when we knew that we were going to take that breathing tube out. And we were all so scared. We all held our breath. She had that tube out and she was fine. We finally won one. We did not let COVID win. We won. Until we get a vaccine, there is no way that this can't be part of our everyday life. We're going to adapt to it, we're going to learn from it, and we're going to grow from it. I have never been so tired when I get home. I am physically, mentally exhausted. That's when I either cry on my way home. I also take a walk down to the water when I lose patience. It's kind of a Hawaiian ritual. And just say goodbye. As a nurse, I fear getting sick, especially since now my son is not here. He texts me all the time and says, "Mom, please don't get sick." It's a possibility. This disease could take any one of us at any time, and I'd be a fool to think that I was immune. I knew what I was getting into, and I chose it. I was meant to be a nurse.
Hi, so here is a little bit about me. My name is Kimmy Siebens. I live in Bremerton, Washington, but work in Seattle at Harborview Medical Center. I work in the trauma surgical ICU. I've been a nurse for 16 years. I do not have children, but I do have 4 dogs that I consider to be my family. I also founded a nonprofit in 2017 to assist the homeless in my community with their pets. I do a lot of advocacy and also help people who live outside to navigate complex systems to help them get more of their needs met. I feel like a mother to so many people I work with and care so much about. I first heard about COVID on the news and then through discussions with other people at work. Initially, I thought it would be contained by public health measures like restricting travel and isolating the people who were infected. But I was wrong. It became obvious pretty quickly that COVID spread way too easily and made people much sicker than I've ever experienced before. I was definitely scared. We were not adequately prepared with enough personal protective equipment, and at that time, I realized my job would be putting my life in danger, directly in the path of an incredibly contagious and deadly respiratory disease, a disease we all knew very little about. As I learned more about the virus, I made plans to live outside of my house in a little travel trailer. Initially, it wasn't completely known how contagious COVID really was. One thing I did know for sure was that it was very deadly. I didn't want to put my significant other or our pets in danger. They were safe inside. My boyfriend could work from home, but I was the biggest threat to their lives at that time. Masks were really hard to find as well. Luckily, I had a friend who worked in China, and some of his connections sent him some masks. He gave me some, and I gave most of them to my clients who live outside. I also lived in the back of my truck for a while before the Hilton hotels opened up for medical providers, which was amazing. I had previously been staying with various friends in Seattle on the days that I work, but that was no longer safe for the other people. In regard to my friends who live outside without a home, COVID somewhat helped them in a really interesting way. Cities and counties started taking this seriously and opened up shelters that were usually only seasonal and allowed them to function year-round. This is something I've always been advocating for. It's so much easier to help people with a roof over their head. I was also very worried about them and their compliance with hand washing and mask wearing. I wasn't able to be around them as much. I didn't want to be the reason they caught COVID. We were being told that some people may be asymptomatic and spread this illness to others without even knowing it. I did not want to be the one responsible for an outbreak in an incredibly vulnerable population. I did not abandon them though. I continued to do a lot of outreach and advocacy using technology. I was able to do multiple fundraisers, such as getting more shelter beds purchased and delivered to one of our homeless shelters due to their increase in the capacity. Watching the news of what was happening in China, in the hospitals in China, quickly made me realize these patients get sick and fast. I knew this would mean my work in the ICU would change significantly. We were already always busy. I work at the only level 1 trauma center for many regions, including Alaska, Idaho, and Montana. The sickest people come to us every day of the year. It never stops. I had no idea where are we going to put all of these new patients who would be requiring ICU level care. I was worried we wouldn't have enough life support equipment for everybody. We have 5 ECMO machines, and it became apparent that many people would need this particular treatment to survive. People were talking about how to decide who gets the machine. It was an awful, awful time. There was a very large amount of women I worked with who were pregnant during this time. They all showed up, they never complained, but I just knew how scared they probably were. I decided to volunteer and work in our COVID ICU. This was a unit they scrambled together by moving the neuro ICU down to 1 unit rather than their normal 3, which gave us 2 units to isolate and treat only COVID patients. At one point during a peak, we had taken over all 3 units of the neuro ICU. I volunteered because I believed it would be so frightening to be pregnant, many of them for the first time, and then working in a COVID unit where little was known except that it had a very high rate of contagion and a high probability of killing you. At the same time, there was actually a nurse who worked in the neuro ICU who had gotten COVID and then was a patient on a ventilator in the COVID ICU. Another nurse I knew got COVID from one of the first patients who had it, and he wasn't so lucky, and he passed away. I honestly figured that my dogs and boyfriend would be okay, and at the same time, I made sure I had everything in order, like my life insurance and my advance directive all updated. Working in the COVID ICU was physically, mentally, emotionally exhausting. I would meet patients who were not yet on life support, but very sick, barely able to talk, out of breath, and they looked scared, and I was scared for them. I knew that they would probably advance to being needed to be put on a ventilator, and that I would probably never hear their voice again. Visitors were not allowed. We would do our best with iPads and video calls. I still don't think I've totally processed what I saw and heard and felt. Sometimes a memory will come up and it will bring me to tears. I have to compartmentalize everything, or I wouldn't be able to keep going right now. People are still getting COVID. Generally, the patients that we are seeing now are all unvaccinated, but it's still going on when many others seem to think that we are in the clear. One of the hardest things for me was when I would spend an entire 12-hour shift seriously working as hard as I could to keep somebody alive, and then walking out to go sleep in my truck and seeing protesters yelling that we were taking away their rights and about how we were purposefully making people sick just to prove a point. That was so tremendously hurtful. This was also during the same time as the enormous Black Lives Matter protesting. The world seemed so chaotic and upset, but we all had to keep it together to keep saving lives. I have seen my colleagues become very exhausted. I have seen more people leave the hospital and this career in the past 2 years than ever before. The pace at which we are expected to perform, it's okay for a short time, but this has become a marathon and it's no longer a sprint. We need better staffing ratios. We want to give our patients the best possible and safe care. This definitely cannot always be accomplished with what we are given to work with. We need to continue supporting our healthcare workers, even if a mask mandate has been lifted. Many of us are exhausted, and we need time to reflect and process what we have been through. If we're always going to be on crisis alert mode, we will not be able to keep people in their positions, and our patients' care will get even worse. I became a registered nurse because I love to help people. It's a pretty simple answer, but it's very true. When I was a teenager, I became a wildland firefighter and then a volunteer firefighter in my hometown of Sequim, Washington. The teamwork, the excitement of saving people during some of the worst days of their lives, this was so energizing to me. I would see the flight nurses come out of the helicopters to scoop up my most critically ill patients, and I would always wonder, what happened to them, and how can I be that nurse? I wanted to be there firsthand to make sure they had the best chance at survival. I still have the same amount of passion about my career. I just don't want my profession to lose its reputation of being kind, competent, and skilled providers. We need to keep putting our patients first and advocating that they have medical providers who are treated well and given the tools needed to do a good job. Times have changed, and we need to adjust accordingly. One of the ways that you can help change the world is to make a donation, an investment in the mission of this organization to save lives by improving lung health and preventing lung disease. On your table, there are donation cards, or you can access the giving platform via the link sent in the registration text message. I invite you all to make a meaningful gift on behalf of one of these amazing honorees today. For any gift over $250, the American Lung Association invites you to choose a glassy baby on your way out today as an expression of appreciation. Thank you all so much. I am so incredibly honored to have been able to speak to you, and I wish you all the best health and happiness in your life.